I'll attempt to be very brief. First, I want to say that I'm addressing you as a patriot of the Bahamas with a very heavy heart this morning, because we read an article in the newspaper where the Minister of Transportation this morning in the Bahamas declared that the Bahamas is fully compliant with IMO regulations and our ship registry is strong. And that tells you the kind of situation that we're dealing with in the Bahamas. It's a registry desk, and we have major issues. I'll explain it quickly. How do we move the slides? Obviously, the Bahamas is in the Caribbean at the top, near Florida. This is what we're attempting to protect. This is Freeport Harbor, and so that you understand, in the Bahamas, pilots work as employees of companies. They work as employees of the Freeport Harbor Company, Buckeye Partners LP, or BORCO, and Statoil at South Riding Point. This is a real live picture taken in the Bahamas of exactly what the waters look like. This is no fake. This is how we live every day in the Bahamas. Please excuse my subliminal attempts to get IMPA's next meeting to come to the Bahamas. You can imagine that oil spills on beaches like this would be problematic. Our situation is that we have the third largest ship registry worldwide, and we are not compliant with IMO Resolution A960 in no way, shape, form, or fashion. We do not have a competent pilotage authority in the Bahamas, and pilots are employees of the private companies. Everything is subject to the company's bottom line. Training dollars are used as profit for the companies. They are responsible, and understand this, when you go out to a ship and you're sent by the company, you're not only paid by the company, but the company is responsible for your license. They issue it to you. So if you decide to exercise independent judgment and the company disagrees, your disagreement with the company threatens your job, your livelihood, and your license as a pilot. Our training standards are little to none. The majority of my pilots have never done ECTIS. The majority of our pilots have not done ASAPOR training. And as you can imagine, with the beaches, there are a lot of cruise ships that comes to the Bahamas. Some of our pilots, regrettably, don't have up-to-date STCW. It's extremely risky, as you can understand. Pilots cannot exercise their independent judgment. We have a pilot, so that you can see the kind of diversion from IMO A960. We have a pilot that was responsible for the largest accident in the recent history of the Bahamas. He is on dialysis. He was on dialysis when he got into that accident. And we also have a report from STC BV in Rotterdam, the transportation school, where they assessed, and I quote, that he could not read and write. Our inexperienced pilot issue is that they hire pilots, they fast track them through the system in order for expediency, and pilots make salaries that are not even mentionable. We have a series of incidents that happen at the anchorage in Freeport, and the anchorage would be about 500 feet off of one of the beaches that you just looked at, which is obviously very close. When you saw the satellite photo, our waters are very shallow. So anchorage in the Bahamas is a mandatory pilotage area. The companies have exercised their judgment and said that, man, we don't need pilots to anchorage. About 5 weeks ago, two ships, the NYK Laura and the Marrero Brave, a current shifted. They parked themselves to the anchorage. When the current shift, they ran into each other. Just accidents that happen that can completely be prevented. The Formosa Falcon is a tanker ship that was loaded down with 2 million barrels of petroleum. The captain came into the anchorage attempting to do a maneuver that a pilot wouldn't do in a million years because of the currents in the area. He ended up alongside on the beach. Two of our pilots arrived very shortly in a tugboat and told the Marine Operations Director of Buckeye Partners that they could get the ship off if they move it right now because of where the tide was. The Marine Operations Director instructed them not to get off the tugboat because it was not prudent for the company's liability to assist the ship. The ship remained on the beach for 2 weeks, a beach very similar to the one that I just showed you. Our pilots were completely not allowed to assist. Safety was not a concern at all. All that was at concern was the liability of the company. We fought for independence, and this is what we're trying to achieve. The action taken is that 14 of the 18 pilots from the companies resigned their jobs. For about 4 weeks now, 4 pilots have been doing the work that 18 pilots were closely scheduled to do. The Ministry of Transportation has been non-responsive. The Minister of Transportation in the Bahamas has not even met with the pilots since the resignations. We had a brief meeting with just the President this Monday, which has not come to any resolve as yet. The companies are resisting very strongly. The port director in Freeport is a pilot in management position. It's a very interesting term that I got from IMPA, pimps. And the marine manager is a pimp. And they are both piloting 24 hours a day on a very dangerous schedule. They know better. They know what the regulations are, IMO, ILO, STCW regulations on rest times. We've expressed that to them. They don't care. They're acting in the expediency of the company's interests. The government is supposed to issue us a license, which will make our jurisdiction a competitive jurisdiction. We've made it very clear to the government that our requests are to become compliant with IMO A960. We want non-competitive pilotage, 1 independent pilotage association per port with proper training and intake standards. You should not be allowed to hire a gentleman that has been moving a barge throughout the islands that is 100 feet. And because he has 20 years experience, he is now qualified to be a pilot. And they have hired 6 such persons to replace our pilots, and they now have them on ships, and they're attempting to do the job. And one thing that our president explained is that there are about 2 football fields of difference between a 200-foot barge and a 1,000-foot cruise ship. To give you an idea of some of the incidents, this is the MSC Eugenia. This ship was gorged on the sides. The damage there is about the size of a yellow school bus. This happened when a pilot that was in training was instructed to get on a ship that was larger than his clearance. He was instructed to do so because the marine manager at the time was gambling and said to not be in shape to do his job. At 3 o'clock in the morning, that pilot was sent on this ship that was larger than he had been trained to operate, under the threat, of course, of losing his license and his job. And this is what happened. The MSC Poasia, the very same marine manager, the pimp, he knows that there are only 2 pilots in Freeport that are allowed to bring ships to Port Lucaya Port. Port Lucaya is on the other side of the island, and naturally, as pilots, you know, when you change port, you have to learn the area before you bring a ship. This ship ended up on the maiden voyage of MSC's plan to bring 9 cruise ships to Freeport. Freeport has a population of about 35,000 people. MSC's plan was to bring 9 cruise ships to Freeport. This was the maiden voyage. The MSC Poasia ended up run aground on the beach in Freeport because the marine manager had no prior experience bringing ships into Port Lucaya. This is a picture taken by a customer on the cruise ship and blasted around the internet. You can Google the MSC Poasia and see YouTube videos with people in the Bahamas feeling like they're very close to the shore, but they're not. And the opinion of the pilots was that it was probably more difficult for him to end up where he did than to go where he was supposed to go. He was coming in to 15 foot, going 8 knots. This is the jetty at Buckeye Partners LP, Borco. This is the damage that ensued after the pilot that was on dialysis at the time that STCBV has concluded cannot read and write, mashed the Cape Barry into the jetties. If you notice, there is a ship on the other side of the jetty. The only reason that the Cape Barry didn't go through the jetty and hit the other ship and cause a full oil spill is because they hit the piles. The other reason why we didn't have an oil spill from the ship that hit the jetty directly is because he hit it at a 90-degree angle, bow first. This is the ship being pulled off. There's no confusion as to what our challenges are in the Bahamas. There's no reason explainable why a pilot should run a ship 90 degrees into a jetty. That is not the goal of berthing on any level. We want to say a very clear thank you to Mr. Nick Cutmore, who has visited Freeport and the Bahamas. And I want to say, if anyone ever doubts the reason why the International Maritime Pilots Association exists, please have a look at the Bahamas as an example, Argentina, as I heard, as an example. The International Maritime Pilots Association has been critical to helping us get anywhere with our government and anywhere in the industry, getting the international industry players to focus on Freeport and come to understand what the risks are. Captain Mike Watson of the American Pilots, Paul Kirchner, Clay Diamond of the American Pilots have been very helpful. The Trinidad Pilots Association also visited Freeport to help us. Captain Kurt Duncan, Captain Lazari and I was talking on the way here, back from the Panama Canal, and Troy Passad, who is also in projects at the Trinidad Pilots Association. The Houston Pilots Association, they sent representatives to help us in Freeport. Dave Morrell, who is in charge of their technology, and also Clint Winiger, the Vice President of the Houston Pilots. Robert Thompson is the former president who I met with first, and he sort of led the way in the Houston Pilots helping us. Stuart Lilly of the Florida Pilots Association has been very helpful. The New York and New Jersey pilots, Captain Andrew McGovern and Dennis Wheeler. The Organization of Black Maritime Graduates, 90% of my pilots attended SUNY Maritime. So that's Captain Cook of the Delaware River Bar Pilots, and the Society of Bahamian Merchant Mariners, which are the students from the Bahamas that are now at SUNY Maritime. And in closing, I just want to make it clear that we've attempted to make our case to the Ministry of Transportation in the Bahamas. We've attempted to make our case clear to the Grand Bahama Port Authority, who is responsible for the port in Freeport. It's all boiled down to money. Nobody cares about safety. In light of the kinds of incidents that have happened, the gentleman on dialysis who cannot read and write is piloting today, right now, in the interest of protecting the companies. Our pilots are not working because the government is scared to step in. And so the thing that we rely on the most is, number one, support from groups like yourselves, and number two, the fact that all of us know in this room that we're one step away from that incident that we may not be able to turn back from. And every day in, day out, the ships have to move. And we rely on that. We press forward. We hope that our effort will come through as clear as possible, and we ask that each and every one of the groups in here support us as much as you can, because a threat to pilotage anywhere in the world, as we all know, is a threat to pilotage everywhere. The situation in Europe makes that clear, in Denmark, in Argentina. We have to work together, because when pilots work together, we get results. Thank you very much, and I apologize.